Good evening. I am Michael C. Rogers, the interim city manager for the city of Charlottesville. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this forum to hear from 3 candidates who have stepped forward and said that they want to be the police chief in our community. Under the Charlottesville City Charter, the city manager has the authority to and the responsibility to appoint the police chief. The city council has authority to approve the city manager's appointment. Before going forward, let me recognize one of our councilors, Mr. Brian Pinkston is here. Others are expected. Oh yes, and I was looking for you. And Vice Mayor Juan Diego Wade, thank you for being here. Mayor Schnook is ill tonight, so is Councilor McGill. But we wish them well and speedy recovery. The city manager, through a competitive selection process, selected Polyhire to facilitate the recruitment of candidates for police chief. Polyhire posted a survey soliciting thoughts from the community about the desired characteristics of the new police chief of Charlottesville and the issues they would like to see the new chief address. The city manager and Polyhire held more than 40 virtual conversations with stakeholders across communities in the city to get a sense of what's important to focus on for the new chief. Based on the information from the survey and stakeholder interviews, Polyhire developed a recruitment brochure that was published across the country. Polyhire screened 19 candidates that came forward and submitted 5 candidates for our consideration. The city manager formed an executive screening committee which interviewed virtually the 5 candidates. As a result of that process, one of the candidates was eliminated and 1 candidate declined to continue in the process. We have tonight 3 candidates who have been interviewed by our internal committee, as well as a panel consisting of employees of the police department. Tonight's forum will be moderated by Mr. William Mendez, Chair of the Police Civilian Oversight Board. The PCOB, though a new element in our government, is an important component in assuring there is transparency and accountability in the execution of police services in our community. I'm very appreciative of Mr. Mendez's willingness to moderate the panel tonight. The questions tonight were solicited from you, the public. Our intent is to ask as many questions as we can within the time allotted. At the end of the questions, there will be an opportunity to mingle with the candidates. All of the candidates' answers through this process will be evaluated by the city manager and used to determine the best selection for our community. I'm now pleased to turn the program over to Mr. William Mendez, Chair of the Police Civilian Oversight Board.
I'm going to stand over there too because I've been sitting down all day. So. Maybe not. You can disappear. You can go that way. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and good evening. On behalf of the Police Civilian Review Board, I'm pleased to welcome you to this very important conversation with the final candidates for Charlottesville Police Chief. Before moving forward, let me identify 2 of my colleagues from the PCOB who are here also, the ex-chair and current vice chair, James Watson, and Dr. Jeff Frazier. We're pleased to collaborate with the Office of the City Manager to host this forum where you will hear candidates respond to questions raised by members of the community. As you know, we invited you all to submit questions to the PCOB mailbox or to our office by phone. We have reviewed a substantial number of questions and selected a number of them intended to cover as wide a range of subjects of concern to the community as possible without being duplicative. During the question and answer period, I will read the question and each candidate will have an opportunity to respond. I remind the candidates that they should be as succinct as possible so that we can get as many questions as possible. I was thinking that maybe 2 minutes would be about the right, would allow us to get through a fairly large number of questions. At the end of the question and answer period, the candidates will have an additional 2 minutes to make their closing remarks. Following the end of the formal question, which is scheduled to end around 8 o'clock, there will be an opportunity for the public to meet and greet the candidates. Now to introduce the candidates, and I would like to thank them for agreeing to participate. Acting Chief LaTroy Durrett from Charlottesville Police Department, Major Easton McDonald from the Loudoun County Sheriff's Department, and Chief Michael Kachis from the Warrenton Police Department. We'll begin by asking each candidate to take up to 3 minutes to introduce themselves by telling us who they are and why they feel they have the experience and background to be our next police chief. Chief Durrett, will you lead off?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I chose to do this career 30 years ago. Started off in high school because a police officer took a special interest in me to change who I was as an individual. I came up through the Explorer program and then started my career in the police department. I've been here for 30 years. I'm somewhat homegrown. I moved to Charlottesville when I was about 15 years old. I had a child that went through public schools here in the city, and I call Charlottesville my home. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I care. I care about this community. I care about the interactions that we're having with our community and trying to go through a healing process for this community because we all have had trauma and I want to be a part of that healing process. I want to be a part of the moving our department forward. So that's where I am, short and sweet.
Thank you. Major McDonald.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. It encourages me to see so many people from the community interested in something like a police chief position. The community plays a huge role in that, and I'm glad that you're participating with that. Briefly, I have spent 25 years in law enforcement from the very beginning in juvenile detention, corrections, and in patrol with Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. What attracts me to Charlottesville is what Charlottesville was advertising. You were advertising for 21st century policing, a community engagement, someone that was going to listen to the community, work with the community, and at the same time arrange for training and education within the department and be supportive of that. This is why I'm attracted to Charlottesville, and I look forward to taking your questions tonight and answering any questions that you may come up with.
Well, again, yes, thank you very much for being here. It is, and as Major McDonald said, it is refreshing to see folks here and involved in this process. My name is Michael Kachis. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I've been in Virginia for a long time. I spent most of my career with the Alexandria, Virginia Police Department. And in 2020, I was appointed Chief of Police for the Warrenton Police Department. That was February of 2020. A month later, the pandemic hit, and we had to kind of figure things out. And then shortly after that was the murder of George Floyd. And what I saw after that time, I thought was a turning point in this profession. We realized quickly engaging our community wasn't good enough anymore, and that we really needed to start involving the community in what we do. And we've done just that in the town of Warrenton. I've been there almost 3 years now, and we've made a lot of strides. What has really attracted me to Charlottesville, with the research I've done and I've gotten to learn a little bit about the community, this is a community that is screaming to be involved with its police department, whether it be the Community Oversight Board. You know, I've talked about this earlier, just about that, it's an oversight board that wants to be involved in the police department. It's not just a review board. That matters. That's a difference. There's a difference between the two. Okay, so that's why I'm here. I feel like I can make a difference here. And what chief wouldn't want to work in a community that wants to be involved with the police department? And that's a big difference than simply engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first question for Chief Durrett. As Chief of Police, what motivates you to continue your daily activities enforcing the rule of law?
It's not just enforcing the rule of law. It's building connections with the community, because if you don't build those connections with that community, the rule of law is just that. Our citizens demand to be heard. Our citizens demand action. And this community has a way of wanting to be policed, and we have to be attuned to that. So just the rule of law is not by itself. Community connection, community involvement, community concerns. It takes us all, I said it before, it takes a whole village to raise a community, not just the police. It takes us all to raise and start healing, start connecting, communication. People need to feel valued. People need to feel they're heard, and then the actions behind it. We have to recognize we failed. At some point in 2017, we failed. Now we have to change that perception, and that is getting involved in our communities, hearing what they have to say, and then being a department of action to address those concerns. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. Major McDonald, what motivates you to continue your daily activities enforcing the rule of law?
So for me, I am a true believer in the need for police, which is to stop crime. That's the role for law enforcement, is to stop crime. How you do that is where police departments get into trouble, and that is involving the community in the crime that they are affected by. I believe in law enforcement. I think it's a noble profession. There's no one in my family that was in law enforcement. It was attending high school in New York City. I had a football coach that was a police officer, and up until that point in time, I didn't have any idea that I wanted to be a police officer. And I met that individual, saw that he was real, human. He worked just like everyone else, and he did get hurt quite a bit. He was human, and that was my first encounter really with someone on a personal level to be in law enforcement. And now that I'm in the profession, I see it as a noble profession. There's nothing better than helping people, and that's to be a professional and a paid professional. To be able to do that is fantastic. As a chief, you get to direct how that policy can take place. And after 25 years of doing this, I have ideas that I would like to share in policing. Some of them are new ideas, some of them are old, but you get to direct the way that you would like to move forward with your police department.
Thank you.
So So similar to what Major McDonald said, I do believe law enforcement is a noble profession. I also recognize that our profession carries some baggage, and that we have to understand the history of our profession and where we've been, and that we haven't always been on the right side of justice, if you will, okay? But what motivates me is I've seen the good that we can do as a profession. I've seen communities embrace us, embrace police officers in some of the most difficult times of their lives. Recently, I had a video sent on one of my about one of my officers from a woman who had overdosed several times, and one of my officers arrested this person several times. She overdosed the last time. This officer saved her life and then went and visited her in the hospital on her day off. Okay? That's real life stories. Okay? So there's a lot of good our profession does, but we don't do a good enough job of teaching our history to our young officers. And I've said this earlier, we're going to be hiring officers that aren't going to remember 2017. And shame on us if we don't teach them. And shame on us if we don't explain and learn from that. So what motivates me is that opportunity to bring in a new workforce. We talk a lot about 21st century policing. What we really need to ask ourselves is, what does the 22nd century policing report look like? Because that's where we're going. And we have an opportunity right now in our profession to do just that and to write that document that those before us wrote in the 21st century policing report. That's what motivates me.
Thank you. Okay, for question 2, we'll start with Major McDonald. What are your views on community neighborhood policing? Can you be specific about how you would implement such programs in Charlottesville?
So I spent a part of my career in community policing, and to define what it is, what it means. As a community policing officer, I was assigned to a neighborhood. I wasn't tied to a radio where I had to respond to 911 calls, which allowed me to walk in the community. I give you an example of community policing and what the effect can do. I noticed 2 boys in that community that were always walking around on foot in the community. And one of them, I stopped one day and I said to him, hey, do you play football? He said, no, I've never played football. I think he was from Ghana, and he had moved to the area. And I got to know him. I got him to go. I said, listen, you should go to the local high school. Your high school, you should try out for football, come to this camp. He came to the camp. As soon as he took off running, the coach looked at him and he said, who's that kid? I said, Coach, he goes to your school. It's a football camp. We used to work in the community with kids. That kid ended up getting a scholarship to play football at Shepherd University. The only reason he went there was because I was the cop in his neighborhood who got to know him inside his neighborhood and saw something that introduced him to that particular coach. Community policing is speaking to the grandmother that's having problems with her grandson, or he's hanging around the wrong company, and her being able to speak to that community policing officer and give her advice about how she can possibly deal with him, or even speak to him in a manner that doesn't mean that he's going to jail or that there's going to be force. Just have a conversation with him. Community policing is walking the beat, being in the neighborhood, knowing what's unusual, the quality of life issues, abandoned cars, assisting the public to get what they want within their community. So, having been a community policing officer, the question is, do you assign a few people to be community policing officers, or do you take that as a philosophy with your entire department? If you work in a community that has retail stores, I expect the officers to go inside those stores and know those individuals, stop and talk to them, find out. You'd be surprised the contacts that you can make. Most people see the uniform. There are individuals, we're more than just the uniform, but you won't know unless you speak to that person, and you'll be surprised about how much you may have in common with that police officer. That will build trust, that will get information between the two of you, the community, and though you use that communication, that information, to help make the place safer, make it better. whatever the situation may be.
Chief Cochise?
Thank you. Great question. You cannot be effective in community policing if your community doesn't trust you. So that's where you need to begin, right? So in order to build trust within a community, you have to build relationships. And in order to build relationships, you have to be present. And when I mean being present, it's not during the worst of times. It's present during non-law enforcement activities, okay? You've got to build meaningful relationships. You know, I kind of look at policing as a co-production with the community, okay? Doesn't matter, just because you have coffee with a cop, or go to a school and read books, that doesn't mean you're building relationships with the community. It has to be purposeful. You have to understand why you're there and what different programs you're doing. Now, we've done just that in the town of Warrenton. We've built a community action team where we involved community stakeholders, such as the president of the NAACP, faith leaders, business owners, residents, and even a high school student. And we meet monthly to this day for the last 2 years and review our policies at the micro level. If you want to have police reform and understand what we do and us understand the community, you have to have thoughtful conversations with thoughtful people sitting at the table and dig deep into our policies. We're a policy-driven profession, okay? So, and then when you do that, you understand what your community wants of you. You understand what your community expects. And then you can develop a community policing strategy with the community, with those stakeholders, by involving them in what you do. There are tons of programs out there for community policing. We've done restorative justice programs involving See It in a Different Light, which is a role reversal program with the youth as a diversion. We have a community police academy that requires graduates to volunteer at least 10 hours of their time a year with the police department, all around the idea of involving the community in what we do. It has to start there. And community policing isn't new. This is something that was laid out by our founders of policing in 1829. We've just probably lost our way for a little bit, and we need to get back to our roots of doing just that. Thank you.
Chief Durrett?
I use community policing as one word, and that's partnership. Community policing is getting out and connecting with communities throughout the city, having that partnership, relationship building, building that trust, reestablishing that, because we've lost that here in Charlottesville. I know that. We have to have a community top down, down up philosophy. Every officer needs to be a part of that, and listening to community members that have that voice and recognizing it, and being a department of action to help support that. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that partnership, community policing is not going to work. It's got to be all inclusive. Everyone needs to have a voice. Everybody needs to feel valued, and that's where that partnership comes in with community policing, and you got to have it. And it's part of that 21st century policing model. So that's what I would do in this seat.
Thank you. Chief Cochise, what do you think about the Marcus Alert 988 system, and how do you think it could be improved?
Well, great question. So we were one of the pilot programs for the Marcus Alert. And the Marcus Alert program, what we've done when we first started doing that, created a co-response model, if you will. Now, the conversation around co-response model has been kind of a hot topic, especially within the law enforcement profession for the last few years. And what do those look like? Now, there's different models.
If I could interrupt for a second, perhaps you could tell the audience what the Marcus Alert program is.
Yeah, so the Marcus Alert system is basically it's not 911, calls get diverted at the communication center, okay? And the call will then, if it's a mental health call, that a team can go out, that's not law enforcement related, and address folks who are in crisis. We have found some initial challenges with it, just because These are big decisions that dispatchers are making when the calls come in, okay? So you still have to work, while the idea is to divert these calls, we still have to, there are still times where police are gonna have to respond, okay? What we have seen, the success of the program is really with the follow-up, okay? So I'll give you an example, and we could probably have a whole other forum on the mental health crisis in Virginia and what we're dealing with, okay? But so when someone is in crisis and we bring them to an emergency room and they're there for 3 days and then don't get the help they need, which happens every day in this state, the co-responders or the mental health services can go out and do the follow-up so that they can still get services long-term, so that we don't have to keep dealing with the same folks, okay? And that's been the real success, in my opinion, is those follow-ups, and with those follow-ups come relationships, okay? There are some challenges, and we're still going through them here in Virginia with the triaging of the calls in the dispatch centers. So we're dispatched through the Fauquier County Sheriff's Office, and they're still working through that. And then I know in Charlottesville, we're dispatched through a regional dispatch center as well. So, so there are some challenges with it, but I'm optimistic. I think it can work, or some model of.
Thank you. Chief Durrett.
Marcus Alert. We all have heard that law enforcement should get out of the business of mental health. I somewhat agree with that. But this is a way where we can partner with our first responders, rescue, and mental health workers to establish that. We need more mental health clinicians. We need more bed space to help when people are in crisis. It's not just the police, because more often than not, it could cause more trauma. It can cause more hurt. I recognize that. And I think having a co-response team will help back that response down from the law enforcement aspect of it, and let those clinicians do their jobs. Work on saving those. Mental health, it affects everyone in this room in some fashion. We all know someone that may have a crisis or have been through a crisis, and it's not always that badge and that gun that's going to solve that problem. And we got to have folks in place and be able to have a response to deal with mental health. It's not just the police. I believe in that. And in my tenure here, I would love to see that develop and have that partnership with mental health clinicians so that the cops are not always responding to that and wearing that weight, because they need help, not police in that respect.
Thank you. Major McDonald.
So if you just show me a hand, is there anyone not familiar with the Marcus Peters Act? Anyone not familiar? Okay, so that way I'll try and cover that. So if you dial on your phone 988, you will automatically be sent to a dispatch, and that could be this is for behavioral health. So if you have someone that is saying, I feel depressed and I want to hurt myself, and you were to get law enforcement, that would be 911. The police would come. We would talk to the person, try to find out if there was a threat to themselves or others. Do they need to be transported to the hospital or not? What Marcus Alert allows is for the citizens, the community, to dial 988, which works now, and the people on that phone, the dispatchers, will decide what level of service you should receive. So police officers, if I'm correct, will be coming on level 3 and 4, where there's a threat or there's some sort of harm. But if you call and say, hey, I'm calling because my son or my mother or my father is feeling depressed right now, can you send someone over? You will get a mobile crisis response unit. In my county, there are response units that will respond to the house, and they will attempt to stabilize the individual. And when I say stabilize, that means speaking to them. Maybe they're off their medication. They will deal with them from the behavioral aspect of the problem. And that is what is needed for the Marcus Alert. Now, if there is violence or the threat of violence, that is where law enforcement will come. They will render the place safe and then allow mental health therapists to do their job. There's also an aspect of this where there's corresponding, where you can have the mental health worker and law enforcement respond together to this situation. The idea is that to have a trained mental health therapist deal with mental health behavior rather than a law enforcement officer. If you have pain, if you have a toothache, you want to go to a dentist, not a cardiologist. And so this is a way to get the right service and resource to deal with a behavioral health. I'm absolutely for it, and I think that was your question, right?
Okay, Chief Durrett, you're up again. As Chief of Police, how will you engage the Charlottesville community residents to be collaborative and engaging partners in keeping the city safe, protecting its residents, while maintaining public trust?
We have to get out there and have relationships and communication skills. We got to get out and talk to our neighbors, right? And our neighbors are our citizens. Building that trust. You have to get out, have difficult conversations, Also being vulnerable. We've made mistakes. Owning those mistakes, showing our vulnerability, but getting out there, having relationships, having those conversations with communities throughout the city, it's got to be done. It should be done, and that's the only way, in my opinion, that we're going to heal and move forward. Is having those difficult conversations.
Thank you. And by the way, if anybody wants me to reread a question, I can do that. Major McDonald?
So one of the things that I plan to do, if I'm fortunate to be selected, is to teach you my job. In 1988, I used to attend a college festival at Virginia Beach. I want to say it was, Labor Day. Used to take place in Virginia Beach in 1988. I remember going to that event, and there was a police officer in riot gear on the boardwalk. This was 1988. And I remember how I felt when I saw that officer. Here's a group of college kids. Why are you here in riot gear? I was angry. I felt a very negative way about the officer. He didn't speak. He just stood there, didn't move out the way. So I know what that side feels like. 1 year later, there was a riot at Virginia Beach the same weekend because of that event. I didn't go in 1989. I got so turned off from 88 that I knew I wasn't going back. So I understand from the citizen side. What I believe is that it's my job to teach you and to open the door for you to see what police officers do, how they think. Citizens Police Academies. How do we come to the conclusions that we come to? What are the reasons why we may use force against resistance? Why do we come with 2 cars? Why do we carry the equipment we carry? What are those things? You can educate the community on those things. When you see it from that perspective, it may help you totally understand what it is that we do. And that is part of one of my core values, which is the consideration, right? To be considerate. And someone comes to a scene and you want to videotape it and you want to record it, I need to let you know that you need to do that from about 21 feet. Because the officer needs to control that scene. They need to make sure that everyone else is safe. You can videotape it, but that camera doesn't need to be 3 feet away from the officer while they're doing what they're doing. Why is that? Explain that the safety precautions and the aspects of that. And even maybe do a role reversal, right? So you can see what it's like to be in that position. I would definitely plan on getting into the community and letting you know how it is that we do what we do, and understanding how you feel, having been in that position and feeling that mistrust or that ugly feeling on that boardwalk in 1988 when I was a college student.
Chief Coaches?
So if I'm fortunate to be your chief, I'm going to begin by trying to involve you in our police department, but that's going to require trust. And I'm going to have to earn that trust. The trust wasn't lost overnight. It's not going to be gained back overnight. It's going to take some time. You know, like most communities, after the murder of George Floyd, we had protests, significant protests. And I remember one of the organizers of the local Black Lives Matter protest that we had, she was a high school student. And it was a large protest. And I remember meeting with her ahead of time and said, look, I just want this to be peaceful. I'll answer any questions afterwards. A large protest finished at a park. I answered questions. And then I invited her. You got to remember, this was during COVID, right? So even though we were in protest, we were still doing a lot of things virtually. And I had a monthly What's Up Wednesday show with the chief on virtual, answer questions. So I had her on that show, not a show, but Facebook Live. And we talked and answered questions. And then I appointed her to our community action team, where we review our policies. And we did that. And then she became our first intern. And to this day, when she comes home from college every summer, she interns at our police department. And she is, you know, when I talk to her, what she tells me is that she got to see a different side of police officers, a different perception, if you will, okay? Now, she's a marketing major. I'm hoping she changes her major to criminal justice. So if she's watching, not the first time she's heard that. But it's important to, I can't stress it enough, the co-production of public safety with the community is something our profession was founded on. So where did we lose our way? Okay? And we got to get back to that. And I sincerely think we can. Like I said, trust is complex. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of hard work. But shame on me if I'm not willing to do it.
Thank you. Major McDonald? Have you ever been employed in a municipality with a strong civilian oversight organization? How do you anticipate interacting with the Charlottesville PCOB?
So I come from a sheriff's office. It's the largest full-service sheriff's office in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have over 650 officers and about 430,000 citizens within the community. Now, the difference here is that we answer to the people. So if they're not satisfied with the job that we do, they vote out the sheriff, and then comes a new one. We receive a 90+ positive rating from the citizens every single year. Why? Because we are responsive to them. We communicate with them through social media. We open our doors at our stations for them quarterly to tell them the statistics and the numbers that take place in their areas. And that accountability is directly to the people. So as far as a police citizen oversight board, two ways I look at this. If I'm doing something wrong, because I've always done it that way, I expect that board to identify something that may be wrong, that we can fix, that we didn't see. That's what oversight is for. If we're doing something well, I expect that board to put that information out there and tell the people how well we are doing what we are doing. I use this analogy all the time. No one flies a plane that only lands 50% of the time. That airline's going out of business. Law enforcement needs to be a business that can be as high percentage as possible. It's not 100% business, but we do strive to be as good as we can. And if there's an oversight to look at our policies and procedures and make sure that we are doing the most effective and efficient and impartial policing for our community, I have no objection to it.
Chief Kochis.
So I worked in Alexandria, like I said, for many years. We did not have a citizen review board at the time. They do now, and I'm very familiar with it. Now, I will say within the town of Warrenton, like I've talked about, our community action team is not a citizen review board. And it wasn't mandated on us. It's something that we put together. And just and I talked about how how that team digs into our policies. I'll give you an example of the oversight this team has. We recently, or one of the policies we did was reviewing our body-worn camera policy. And in that policy, it says, I shall release body-worn camera footage to that CAT team within 24 hours of a critical incident, and within 14 days, I shall release it to the public, okay? That is something we came together and made and wrote in our policy. We did this just recently. I had there was a use of force involving an officer, and the question came up, and we released it to the CAT team. It wasn't a critical incident, but there were some questions, and released it and opened to everyone. So I'm a fan of them. I think they work. When you talk about the Community Oversight Board here in Charlottesville, you know, the fact that on their portal online, it talks about recommendations for the police department, okay? And I'm just not convinced that it's been sold correctly or communicated correctly to the rank and file, okay? Because it doesn't have to be a negative thing, right? We have the same goal in mind, and that is have a transparent police department with sound policies and that treats the community correctly. So, so yes, I think they're very effective. The short answer is, though, I haven't had quite that type of board where I've worked with. So.
Chief?
Accountability. That's what they're asking for. That's what this community is demanding. Accountability in how we conduct our business day to day. I believe in a PCOB. I believe in what they're trying to accomplish by holding us accountable and help weed out problem officers, because it affects everyone, everyone. If you don't have a strong, and it's coming throughout the country. It's going to come to just about, in my view, most police departments. Holding ourselves true and accountable creates transparency. I have no issue at all working with the PCOB. I have none at all. That's how you create transparency. That's how you build trust. That's how you create that oversight, making sure our policies and procedures are up to par, best practices, and being able to have that conversation. If you don't have anything to hide, you don't have any problems with the PCOB, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I believe in it.
Okay. Chief Kotras, how would you address disparate policing in Charlottesville?
That's a good question. So so let me say this. There's no room in our profession for bias policing. There's no room for it, okay? Has it happened in our profession? Absolutely. Does it still happen? I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't, because I'm sure it does, all right? But there's no room for it. You know, you really have to, it starts with the education of our officers, the training of our officers, understanding why certain folks will look at officers a certain way, and there's a reason for that, okay? We have, like I've said earlier, our profession carries baggage, and we have to understand that, recognize that, and train our officers so they understand as well. Look, we do implicit bias training, and that's a good start, right? Probably the best implicit bias training I ever attended was when I was in Alexandria. But I will tell you, COVID has now caused a lot of that training to be like a webinar, and I'm sorry. It's too important of a topic to do implicit bias training online, okay? It needs to be in person. It needs to be with members of the community so you can sit down and hear real stories, and officers can understand the impact and that their implicit biases can have, and that they don't act on those implicit biases, okay? That's important. We all have them, whether we like it or not. We all have implicit biases. The difference is, as a cop, if a cop acts on that implicit bias, that goes south very quickly. It's not a good thing. And So addressing it through training. Training from the academy. Our academy's averaging 5 months, about 4 hours of training on our history. Okay? That's shameful, and we need to do better at that. That needs to be part of our implicit bias training. Okay? So it starts with training, and then it goes to accountability. Okay? Following the data. If we're seeing the data, we need to follow the data and then understand why certain things are happening. So,
Thank you. Chief Durrett.
That's why we're here. Because at some point, some folks have felt that way, that this has occurred to them. That's why we're here today. We have to change that behavior, change that culture, right? And it starts with having everyone in here have that conversation. My officers need to know that. They need to hear it from people like this room here, and then have to act on it. It's a developing process. Our department is very young, and you have to start off like today, sitting in a room, hearing what people have to say, how they've been treated, and respect that, and start building with inside yourselves to be a part of that change, right? That's why it's important to me. It's not just those 4 hours. That's continuing throughout the year, so that you can prevent those kind of behaviors out there. Because if not, we're gonna continue to spin our wheels, and it's gonna create more anger in the community. It's gonna create more separation in this community. We have to start from ground zero, bring our community, get them involved in that training. Because if they don't hear it from us, because I say us because I feel like I'm from Charlottesville, if you don't hear it from us, they won't know. So it's very important to me.
Thank you. Major?
So one of the ways to handle this is through data, right? The data will tell us where officers respond. There are body cameras, there are cameras inside the cars, so we can always review that. One of the things I would encourage with the community is call in your compliments of an officer when you see an officer doing something good. Call in your complaints when you see an officer doing something wrong. The problem is too many times people are, if they feel that they have not been treated in the right or respectful manner, they leave that area and don't tell anybody else, maybe a family member, about the bad experience. And then that bad experience continues. I know because as a child, I heard it in my household, all right? What I say is you have to report it. We want to hear it. Accountability is one of those core values that I believe in. Everyone knows how they have to do this job. It, again, will identify where we need training and education within the department. There are a lot of officers out there every day that just want to do the job. They want to keep the street safe. It is what they want to do. But I would need to hear that from the community, because as the chief of police, I'm not going to get pulled over by my own officers and be treated in a particular way, right? You're the ones that are not members of the department that may feel that you can be victim to that. So you need to explain, you need to call in, you need to have access to say, hey, I was pulled over, the officer was courteous, explain to me why he pulled me over, I just want to let him know. It's the same as going to a restaurant and getting a tip. You don't tip bad service. But how many of you let the manager know that I felt like I was being treated unfairly? You just stopped going to that particular restaurant. Well, you can't do that when you drive a car or you live in a particular community. You will constantly have to deal with law enforcement. So you need to report it, good and bad, and then give me a chance to fix it.
Thank you. Chief Durrett, what will a CPD do under your leadership to try to lessen gun violence in Charlottesville?
That's plaguing every community. Some communities get upset when it happens, but it's happening mostly in our black and brown communities, and we have to be attuned to that. because it's in a financial district or whatever it may be, the bells and whistles starts to blow. We have to recognize that that's happening throughout this city, and we have to circle our wagons, if you will, as a community, to address that gun violence, not just because it lands where the money is, because 9 out of 10 it's happening in our black and brown communities where there are disparities, and we have to get there, fix that problem as well, not just because somebody rings the bell because it's starting to impact our financial district. I recognize one gun violence is one too many, but it's a greater picture, and it takes all of us to sit down at a table, put our heads together, put our nose to the ground, and really root out how to address that. I can't do it by myself. It takes a village to raise a community. It takes us all. It can't be just the cops. It just can't be the mental health workers. It takes us all to have an important say, wrap our head around it, and then dig in and try to come up with some meaningful ways to address it and prevent it. Explore programs, Boy Scouts, Neighborhood Watch, all those prove to be helpful to reduce crime. Having that community policing unit out there, knowing your community, knowing your neighbors, having that community member be able to reach out and call and say, hey, Tito, this is what's going on in my neighborhood. Can you help me? And then I have to be in tune and have these officers in tune to go out and address that. Not just because it's in a financial district or it's over here and wherever. We have to get together, circle our wagons, and address it. Not just putting more cops in there, because that brings a different perspective too. Now you're over-policing a community, right? If we have community involvement, community engagement, just sit down and break bread and just talk about it. That's a step in the right direction to solve that gun problem. And we have to do that. If not, it's going to continue. Have stuff for these young people to do in this community. There's not a lot. Sports. You know, and I've heard young people say, you know, there's nothing for us to do in Charlottesville. You know, having transportation for the young people to get to and from activities, we gotta wrap our arms around them, because if we don't wrap them around, somebody else will, and they won't have the best intentions for them.
Thank you. Major McDonald?
So gun violence, again, just dealing with the data, how are individuals getting hold of these guns? We know that a lot of the guns are being taken from unlocked vehicles. They are legally purchased guns. They are left inside a vehicle. The homeowner, it feels so good about the police department and the neighborhood that they live in that they're comfortable leaving the door open. I'm just going to go inside. No one's going to go in my car. And thieves are taking advantage of that. They're going inside the cars. They're taking those weapons, and then those weapons are being used to commit crimes. It's something that we've all got to work together, right? We all have family members. We have to speak down to each other and say, hey, listen, I don't want to hear about you being around any guns. If you know someone that's been around guns, it's part of the community being able to communicate. And as the chiefs have said here, that relationship between law enforcement and the community, do you feel comfortable enough to pick up the phone and call a police officer that you know that will safely come and talk to the person who you believe is carrying a gun? Do you feel comfortable contacting law enforcement to say that, hey, there's a group of kids and I know that this is what they're doing. They're going around at night and they're doing, going into cars and stealing those weapons. All of us are engaged in that aspect of it. The other part of that is I know that Charlottesville does the 9 p.m. lock your car at night. Everybody's got to participate in it. We've all have a role in this. And understanding what we do now is where you would understand law enforcement. If we're about removing guns from the street, you now must understand that the police are looking for those types of behavior where illegal guns are being carried. Yeah, I beg your pardon? Question? Yes. No, I said that Charlottesville PD, a lot of police departments around the country have a program where at 9 p.m. we send a message out. I don't remember if you were, when you were younger, you used to have this commercial that would come on. It's 9 o'clock or something. Do you know where your kids are? It was a commercial that used to come on TV. So law enforcement took that commercial and said, it's 9 p.m. Have you locked your car? So that part of it is where the community, that's what we ask of the community, right? Lock your car. Can't tell you where to put your gun. If you put your gun inside the car, we just ask that you lock it up, because that's how the guns are getting out and about. And so if that's the case, and we know this because we're tracing the bullets and the rounds and the cartridges, and when we track the gun down, it's been stolen from somewhere in one state and it ends up in another state, and then you have victims of that particular weapon. So there's a partnership involved with that. And law enforcement needs to be able, as I said before, to be able to communicate with the community, that you can call and feel comfortable that if you see something, you can say something that may help prevent that.
Well, so I agree, data does matter, right? And I know that recently there's been conversation here in Charlottesville about the data. Actually, gun crime has been down. But that's not any solace to the mother who's afraid to have their kid walk to the school bus stop in the morning, okay? So I was saying that same thing in Warrenton. Gun crime was down, and we had two shootings in 2 weeks in one block. Okay? So gun crime may be down, but that's still a problem. So what we did is we met with key stakeholders. We met with the Habitat for Humanity folks from the Habitat for Humanity. I met with members of my community action team, Virginia State Police, the Sheriff's Office, and my officers. And we all sat in a room. We came up with a strategy to address the issue it's the Hayti Street community. But we went a step further. We took that strategy, and then we met with the community, members of the community, and talked to them about it. And we ran it by them. The members of that community were clear. Actually, they were pretty angry, I'll be honest with you. They were clear to me that they wanted to be policed. They just didn't want to be over-policed. So there's a balance, and there is a clear difference between policing and over-policing. And those of us that have been in this profession for a long time know what that looks like, okay? So we came up with a strategy, and what we found through the data was a lot of the bad actors didn't even live in that community, okay? We identified them, and we removed them from the street, okay? And we stayed in the community. We teach our officers what procedural justice means. Procedural justice is an idea of how you treat people, okay? That, there's a lot of talk about hotspot policing to address gun crime, and that's fine, it's effective, but it could backfire if you don't combine a procedural justice mindset, which is giving people a voice, explaining the why, telling them what you're doing and why you're doing. Instead of just sitting in your car in an area that's a hotspot, you get out and sit on someone's porch and actually know their kids' names, okay? So we have done that, and what we have found, the results in July, we had those 2 shootings. Excuse me, we had about 160 some calls for service in July. In August, we had about 60 to 70. In September, we had 3. October, we had 2. And the month of November, we've had 1 call for service on that street. And we still go there. We had a barbecue not too long ago after that operation because we can't be seen as occupiers. But that community still expects us to be the police. They have the same right to peace and for their kid to walk to the bus stop without having to pick up a cartridge casing from a gun or from a bullet that I do in my neighborhood, okay? Look, and I was going to bring this up during the other portion, but I'm never going to know what it's like to be a black male. I'm just not. There are conversations that Major McDonald has to have with his teenager before they drive that I don't have to have with mine. I get that, okay? But the folks who live in those communities that are most affected by gun crime, okay, they have just as much of a right to peace and tranquility that I do in my neighborhood, okay? So, thank you.
Thank you. Major McDonald, there are several grassroots violence prevention organizations in Charlottesville. Have you had any experience interacting with such groups? And what will your policy be if you become chief?
So I went to high school, I'm going to age myself here. I went to high school in 1982 in Brooklyn, New York. The homicide rate there was 2,000 at the time. So I understand what crime and fear of the streets are like. The only way that you keep your streets safe are by the grassroots stakeholders that are in the community, that have the connection to the people, that can get the message across. There are some people, no matter what I'm wearing, where I meet them, they're not gonna listen to my version of what could happen or how something should be done. So you need different voices, different channels for people to get the same information, which is that we care about what we do. We want the streets to be safe. We want your children and grandchildren to grow up in a safe environment. Every community is different, but every community is entitled to demand the type of service they receive from law enforcement, and that community should be given the opportunity to have that, whether it's through grassroots organizations. I think they're fantastic, and the more people that volunteer from these organizations to get involved from the ground up and can save these youth, the more the better.
Thank you. Chief.
Yeah, very good question. So we've done just this in Warrenton, is where we've involved these groups. The president of the NAACP sits on my CAT team, and I'm fortunate enough to call him a good friend. For the last 2 years, there's been a Black Lives Matter protest in the town of Warrenton every Saturday between 10 and 11. Last year, they donated money to Special Olympics in honor of the Warrenton Police Department. This year, on December 17th, I'll be accepting another check. Because police reform and public safety don't have to be in competition. We can agree. Like I've said this many times, when thoughtful people sit down and have thoughtful conversations, you'd be surprised how much you agree. I have a police faith coalition where faith leaders, we meet quarterly. And I had a pastor tell me one time, it's really hard to hate someone when you're sitting across the table from them. And that's true. And I don't think we do enough of that. So I invite folks from these grassroots organizations, important organizations, into the police department. Get involved. They attend my community police academy. They attend our employee barbecues. They come to our awards banquet. They're volunteers as part of our volunteer program, okay? Because to be honest with you, I know this community has a lot of hurt. I know there's been some mistrust. I mean, I wasn't here in 2017, but I can only imagine. But I would like to think we probably have more in common than we disagree on. I think you'd be shocked. I really do. So, yeah, you got to involve folks in. We have the same purpose. We want safe communities to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Durrett.
I go back to what I said. It takes a village. And sometimes these grassroots, they know the hurt, they know the pain, they know the problems. Sometimes we can't get in there and have that connection because the people are fearful from us. We've misused that badge. We've misused it. So we've lost some of that trust, right? If we can have organizations that can go out and help bring this community together, I'm for that. But we have to work as partners. I say it over and over again, it takes a village to raise a community. They're gonna touch some places that we can't touch. We need to support them when we can, as often as we can. That's how we're gonna regain that trust, because, and that's gonna take time. That's gonna take, we're 5 years into, since 2017, this city still hasn't healed yet. They're gonna be traumatized for a long, long time. Using these grassroots to help bridge those communities is a need. PCOB is bridging that gap. Some folks talk about other organizations. They're trying. It takes everyone, not just the police, to build those. And I hope everyone in this room get in contact with one of these organizations that have your same views and values about helping our community grow and heal, and get involved in that. It can't be just us. Our kids, we got to get our kids involved in these grassroots organizations. So,
Thank you. Chief Codris, have you ever worked in a police department which was dealing with morale and esprit de corps issues which affected the hiring and retention of police officers? And if you have, how were these issues addressed, and what was your involvement?
Good question. Thank you for it. So when I came into Warrenton, they had 3 interim chiefs in 18 months prior to me getting there. I didn't think they had a position that they didn't, they had more acting positions than they knew what to do with, okay? So I came into a challenge, and morale was pretty low. And to be honest with you, if you're gonna have an effective strategy of managing an organization, there needs to be stability at all levels, and that begins at the top. So what we've done, we started hiring people, and we created a clear mission and vision and purpose, okay, and then built a strategic plan involving the rank and file in that strategic plan that aligned with the town's strategic plan. And what that did was give the rank and file a sense of ownership of how we were going to operate, okay? We got fully staffed. We are now fully staffed. I have 0 vacancies for the first time in 15 years. The last vacancy we had, I had 144 applicants, okay? And we don't pay well. We don't. So, look, and I'll tell you, I didn't think as a young cop I'd ever say this. It ain't all about the money. It's just not. And you know why it's not about the money? Because the young women and men who get in this profession don't get into it just for the money. So they get into it because they want a sense of purpose. And as a leader, it's our job to provide that sense of purpose. It's our job to make sure what we're asking of these young officers is clear. The type of policing we expect, the type of policing the community expects. And it is incumbent upon us to make sure we hire the right people as well. To understand, or that they understand when they're coming into an agency, policing isn't something they saw on Cops, okay? It's about serving a community, right? Going back to our roots. So we are in a good spot right now. It's been a lot of work. Doing it during a pandemic was not easy. Doing it, with significant scrutiny on our profession. I'll be honest with you, that wasn't easy, but my God, thank God it happened. Not thank God that happened, but thank God we are moving in that right direction. I believe that our profession's moving in the right direction. We have a lot of work to do, okay? But yeah, and look, morale, I would like to say morale is very good within our agency. If it wasn't, I'd have a lot of vacancies, I'm sure, because officers, these kids are smart and they can go anywhere. So,
Chief Durrett.
Modeling the way. They look at leadership to set the tone. Come in there and you're mad at the world. That's gonna breathe that. You have to model the way, set those expectations, set those standards. Being able to say good morning, and that's good morning to anybody. That's the first start, because then you start showing them the behaviors that you expect from your officers. And then holding them accountable when they make those mistakes. But modeling the way, setting expectations, clear messages, and giving them an opportunity that they have a voice. But I also am not naive that our community has been that way for quite some time too, right? They have low morale. And that low morale is because they don't trust us, they don't support us. So we're gonna have to model that way and have that relationship to build that. The officers have to be able to show the crack in the armor, if you will, and be willing to have difficult conversations, and that starts from top down. You have to model the behavior.
Thank you. Major McDonald?
So, yes, about in 2012, when I was working for the sheriff's office, about 2008 to 2011 or so, morale was low. How did we fix it to where it is today? We have the lowest crime rate in the capital region. We emphasized a plan of professionalism. We let the officers know what was expected of them, what we wanted out of them, and then we held them accountable when they didn't do that. But we also provided them with the equipment and the training to be able to do their job. Let's understand this very clearly, that you hire someone to become a police officer, it doesn't mean that they're a great communicator. It doesn't mean that they've worked in the community that you've placed them into police. So you do have to spend the time, the money, and the training to get them assimilated, get through the confirmation biases that they may have in their mind so that they can go into those neighborhoods and now work it. A brand new officer coming in, he may be shaky what he's doing. He's trying to do his best, but he's kind of shaky. See him 5 years later, and he's speaking to everyone in the community because he was taught the right way by a good trainer. And with that, morale picks up. Again, the reason why morale in the community that I work in, and I've seen that change over the last 12 years, it is not unusual, and any officer in Loudoun County will attest to this, to go to a restaurant and get ready to pay your bill and somebody's paid it. That's not unusual, and it's anonymous. Why? Because they observe the professionalism and the respect that we provide to our citizens. People need to be trained to be police officers. It's not going to happen overnight. For the women who go to a hairstylist, you don't just go to any hairstylist to play with your hair. I used to do that. Look at me. You pick those people. You pick those people because you value what they can do, and that takes time in law enforcement. It takes time in a police department. Give them the equipment and the support, and then hold them accountable for the job that you want them to do. We've already discussed that the job that we want them to do is what the community is asking them to do. They want people to slow down. They don't want people speeding down their streets where kids are playing, things of that nature. But again, remember, everyone doesn't grow up learning how to speak politely to people or respecting people's cultures. You have to train them to do that and educate them to do that. And in law enforcement, we do that as well. So morale can change. I've seen it change. It works.
Thank you. An overlapping question, Chief Durrett. While maintaining morale, how will you inspire and motivate Charlottesville Police Department officers to deliver their best talents toward protecting the city and its residents?
Your best talent is from within, right? We need to recruit local folks that know local problems, because they know. Once you harness that, that starts to grow. That creates that us mentality, not a we, it's a us. Me turns into a us. Tap into our local schools, community colleges, find that homegrown, because they already know. They know. And when you get that changes cultures, it changes behaviors. model behavior, right? Say yes ma'ams and the good mornings, that goes a long way. Teaching the basics. Because our kids today, they're into this technology world, right? They're using that more often than not. They forgot to say good morning, and we should reinforce it. If they're not saying it to us, we should be saying it to them. I tell people all the time, I challenge you, when you see a cop stand there, say good morning. Make them talk to you. Make them talk to you, because you deserve that. You deserve that. And you should deserve a proper response from them as a good morning to you. That's where I think that's going to be a part of that solution.
Okay. Major McDonald?
So you have, in your departments, you have to find those, you have to give people the opportunity. There's a lot of talented people inside your department, but you have to give them the opportunity to identify the skills that they have. And then once you identify those skills, you need to place them in a position where they can utilize them. I remember as a sergeant once in patrol, I responded to a call. It might have just been a runaway call. And the officer spoke to the young lady that had ran away. And her tone and her demeanor with this young girl on why she ran away and why she was in this turmoil in her house was amazing to see how she could get through to this young lady. That's a skill set that someone has. So you want that person in a position where they are dealing with the youth or children that are dealing with that type of problem in the home, and that can be in investigative manners, it could be in traffic enforcement. You have to find out where that individual is, their talents are, and place them in the position, and they will do a good job.
Thank you. Chief, gotcha.
Yes. So first of all, what we really need to do is stop sending broken cops into broken communities, because it's a recipe for disaster. And we do it all the time, okay? We have officers who deal with a lot of stuff. They're human, okay? And we cannot expect, like around the conversation of procedural justice, we cannot expect our officers to treat the community with a procedural justice mindset if we don't do the same for them internally within the agency. It won't work, okay? You know, this starts really by also hiring the right people. You know, when I'm fortunate that I have the opportunity, when I do have a vacancy, to hire someone, to meet with them individually, okay? And what I'm looking for is diversity in thought, diversity in perspective, maybe not necessarily a criminal justice background, okay? What is the best fit for the community? I think that's important. And then we have to take our officers and we have to give them the tools they need to do the job, the training they need to do their job. We need to invest in them, because we cannot expect them to treat our community the way we expect them to if we just keep going down the same road of not taking care of them as well, okay? We expect a lot of our officers, as we should. We can't afford to have bad apples. I said this earlier in a panel, but look, there's some professions you can't have a bad apple in, okay? Police work is one of them. Pilots are probably another. I wouldn't want a bad apple fly on my plane. But, you know, there are some you can't. So we have to hold them to account, right? But when they do something right, we need to celebrate them. We need to celebrate their good points as much as we celebrate their mistakes, okay? And I think when we start doing that, we're going to create an environment within our police department, okay, that treats the community the way we want them to be treated. So yeah, there's my answer. Sorry. I keep going on about that.
That's all right. Starting with, in this case, with Major McDonald. What's your plan to grow, recruit, and retain officers of color and women so that the department will reflect the diversity of our community?
So I can answer to recruit if persons of color. I can answer that aspect. I don't know the full diversity makeup of the Charlottesville PD, but I will give some ideas here, and I always preface this by saying that I'm giving away my ideas, and now they'll be used by other departments. But one of the things that you can do is, and we had success with this, was you go to the local colleges and universities. That could be historically black colleges and universities. Every school has a African student union group or organization of African unity. You have a Divine Nine at various schools. And in criminal justice, you get with the chair at that criminal justice school, and you introduce them to Charlottesville PD. Now, you're not selling the police department, because your police department you're trying to improve. You want it to be better. So where it is, it's good, but you want it to be great. You're selling the area of Charlottesville. You're selling the beautiful community where you can raise kids, what opportunities exist here. You recruit them and ask them, if they're interested in being a police officer, Charlottesville is a beautiful place to come and be a police officer. If that is the diversity aspect you're looking at. I often look at professions where people think that you have to have a college degree to be a police officer. I can assure you that people are people and come from all walks of lives. If you have a waitress that has, better than that, if you have a hairstylist, a beautician who works, and that money is never guaranteed, right? It depends on how many heads they can work on, how many highlights they can get, or what the cost is. Law enforcement is very attractive for women of color. It just needs to be explained to them. It carries benefits. It carries a guaranteed check amount every single pay period. And if you can do here, you can handle anyone in society with an issue. Because people are very, people are serious about their hair, right? So you can communicate, because this job is 90% communication. It's 90% talking to people and getting to where they are at that time. So universities, randomly going within the community and other communities and introducing people to the profession. I didn't look at law enforcement until later on in college. It was later on in college I decided, hey, this looks like something that I could do. And of course, I didn't know anything about it until I was in that profession. It is a profession that you can pick up, you can raise a family on it. You're absolutely right, Chief. It's not a profession for wealth, but it's an honest living. It's a noble profession. I have a daughter that is processing now with a police department. I believe in it, and it is a very rewarding career. And there are a lot of people, if given the opportunity, that have never thought about it. You can get them into this profession.
Thank you. Chief Koches.
Yes. So I'll start with hiring female officers. So about 2-3 months ago, we signed on to the 30-30 initiative, okay? And I'm proud to say we are at 24% of my sworn staff are female officers. And while I may not be able to quantify it, I could tell you our use of force data, way down. It's just the reality. They can talk to folks. They just make better cops. I'm just gonna be honest with you, okay? They just do. And so we have signed on to that initiative. We've committed to get to 30% and maybe even above that. Part of that 30-30 initiative is also to ensure that command staff and in the higher ranks are involving female sworn staff as well. So we're committed to doing that, and it's something that a commitment we've signed on to hold us accountable to it. And we're going well within that. The other part I'll talk about is you have to be really purposeful and not be afraid to say, I need a workforce that accurately reflects the community we serve, okay? And it's not just a one-time thing you do. It's not just a job fair, which are important. It's not just a college you go to, which I agree with Major McDonald, very important, or recruiting at the local barbershops. But it needs to be a mindset that your agency does in the realm of managing your image. What image are you portraying as an organization is important. So when someone walks up to that table at a job fair, they're going to walk away and get right on their phone and go right on your Facebook page. What are you portraying? They're going to go on and they're going to Google Charlottesville Police Department. What's out there? Okay? They're going to ask friends. They're going to ask cops. Cops talk, right? So you have to be really purposeful. You have to be very strategic in making sure that we are portraying the right message and the right image so folks want to come and work for the Charlottesville Police Department. And if you're not doing that, the one-offs of just going to a job fair or going to a college, that may work for a little bit, but it's not going to sustain you. Okay, so it really needs to be a department-wide strategy, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of your younger officers are some of your best recruiters. Okay, but you got to make sure you're recruiting for the right folks. Okay, and with the right mindset that have diverse thought and diverse perspectives as well. That's important. Thank you.
Chief?
I got into police work unexpectedly. You know, I came from the other side of the railroad tracks. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. My parents died at a very young age. I was very young. I know how it is to be homeless, but I also had an officer reach out to me and said, hey, let's start off with this, right? He started me off into wrestling, got me into the Explorer program. Sometimes people can't make it to college. Some people can't afford it college. We have to start younger, in my mind. Having our young adults get involved in something other than hanging out on the streets, right? We, as a village, have to start encouraging our young people to get involved in their communities. Start there. After you connect with the young people, go into your high schools, your middle schools, have that relationship, get them involved, because some people are not going to make it to college, especially people of color. That is a low number. So we have to circle our arms around, start there. And if they're so happen to get in that college world, we're just getting a better product, right? But that product doesn't necessarily mean it has to be formally educated. You just got to give some trust in it, put some stock in it, and let it grow and season it as its profession, because that's what happened to me. Somebody took a risk, showed some interest, put a little season on me, and let me grow. If we do that to our young people, give them an out. Give them an out. That might help. And that's where we're going to build our community. Our young ladies, you were seeing it, truck drivers. My dad was a truck driver, you know. Now there are female truck drivers. We need female officers out there. We need representation. Women. We need that. Representation of our community, because without it, we're treading water. That's how we see it, and as long as I'm going to be in this space, I'm going to try my best. Start from small and get this representation together, so it looks like the reflection of Charlottesville.
Thank you. Chief Kachas, as chief, what policies and practices will you institute to protect the rights of unsheltered people?
Very good question, and I know that Charlottesville, I believe the last numbers in 2021, somewhere around 160 some unhoused individuals within the city, and then there's been a market increase of somewhere around 260. And you're seeing that throughout the country, to be honest with you. I think it's a combination of things, to include the cost of living, cost of housing. There's the, coming out of the pandemic. I think there's also a combination of folks who are coming back. Remember, we've been at war for 20 years, okay? Folks coming back. And when you look at the unhoused community and you meet folks who are unhoused, there's typically something else going on, okay? And I think we have to be really clear to say that and understand that being homeless is not against the law. It's not a crime, okay? And so we have to recognize that. You know, when I worked in Alexandria, there was a unit of actually 2 officers who made it a point to know every person who was homeless within the city. Had relationships with them, bought them Christmas presents. I mean, knew them well. And the importance of that is because when you get a call from someone who says, hey, this person's laying down in front of our store, or there's, you know, they're laying on a bench or something of that nature, they know that person's history, they know what's going on. They may need mental health services or other services, okay? So you have to have that. The other point I want to make is housing in general. Now I know Friendship Manor, they're doing they're adding to it. I believe they're actually adding up to 450 new units there. And what I thought was interesting about that project is that the folks who live there have had a say in what that looks like. They've actually said they want a tiered income level system, so it's a way to kind of build based on how much income you make into a better apartment or something of that nature, okay? And I've seen that work firsthand through Habitat. Habitat for Humanity does a lot within the town of Warrenton. And the program of home ownership, just in general, getting people invested in their home and being a homeowner, there's a lot of work that goes into, okay? And look, affordable housing, I'm sorry, whether we like it or not, law enforcement's involved in that conversation. We have to. There's a lot of people investing a lot of money in affordable housing, okay? And they need to work with law enforcement to ensure that those neighborhoods are safe, okay? So going back, though, to what you would typically call someone who is unhoused, you know, you have to understand the complexities that these folks are dealing with. When working with them, we have to train our officers to understand that, and we have to train our officers to make sure they understand their names, they know who they are, they build relationships with these folks. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Chief? Oh, yes, your turn. Unhoused, in-house.
2 things. One, I know how it is to be unhoused. I witnessed my mother go through that, not having resources and the struggles. Been there. Second is once that happens, you have a sense of understanding. You don't become that bully, because people, it's not their fault sometimes. They don't have these, you know, making $80,000 a year paying for rent and things. People, sometimes they don't have that. My mom had a 6th grade education. She didn't have that kind of job. She struggled. We have to show empathy on that. And as long as I'm in this space, I'm not going to use our officers to bully and push folks around because they're unhoused, unsheltered. I want to show them empathy. I want them to get some services out there. That's what we need in our community. We need community connections. We need all the resources to join hands and connect and circle our arms around those who are less fortunate. Not the police. It's not our job. Our job is to be sympathetic to the circumstances in which they find themselves in. Because I sure was. I was glad somebody finally took us in. You know, I know how it is, and I want to share that and let our officers know. You're the fortunate one, even though you're making, you know, $40,000, $50,000 a year. You're fortunate. There's some people that don't make it. We're all talking about minimum wage, increasing our salaries and stuff to help support. You know, we're all not going to be engineers. We're all not going to have law degrees. We're not. And in a community where you have a university, all of us not going to, wasn't born with that silver spoon in our mouths. And we have to recognize that. And I'm not, as long as I'm in the space, we're not going to use that as a tool to bully, because the badge was used a long time ago to bully people around, and that scarred us till today. So that's my answer.
Very good. McDonald.
So I had the privilege today to do a ride-along with Charlottesville PD. I think I probably had about an hour and a half. And during that time, there were several calls that were coming in from citizens about people laying in front of their business, or someone was laying down, possibly unconscious. So I would, first dealing with my resources, assign officers, either 1 or 2 officers based on the number of houseless persons. Permanently, that is what they're assigned to do. Similar as far as getting them the resources that they need, making sure that the CSB, which is, say, mental health, is familiar with them and that they are connected with them and they're just not being ignored by the resources that are available. I'd also look at alternative housing. And what that is I'm big on partnerships, right? So the partnership would be, are there areas in the county where a person could put an RV on a piece of property and that person could live in that RV, and in return they would call the police if someone tried to break into their property? Things of that type of nature is what I would look at. Those are examples. Those require partnerships, and I would find officers within the department that have a passion for that. Chief has talked about his experience from that. That's a passion, and there are others in that in the department who have experienced it, understand it, and could be an advocate for those individuals. So that is my answer on how I would deal with houseless persons within Charlottesville.
Thank you. All right, Chief Durrett. Tell us your ideas on how you would incorporate resilience training and accessible mental health services for officers in your care.
As we all know, we have assets out there to deal with stress. We've seen a lot of things, but I also am mindful of what this community experienced. And we have to acknowledge the trauma that officers experienced, and get them the tools, having a robust team to coach, mentor them to we have clinicians on site. Well, we can call clinicians peer support. That's what the word I was looking for. Peer support for our officers to keep them right upstairs, because if it's okay to not be okay, because if you're cracked and you're out there dealing with the community, they're gonna make this community worse. So we have to have countermeasures to mitigate that, and that's through peer support. The city offers a lot of resources for our officers, and our staff need to monitor that to ensure that these officers are out there at their best, providing that quality service that this city demands and expects. So,
thank you. Major McDonald.
So, under President Obama and Attorney General Holder, there were 6 pillars that were put together for 21st century policing. One of those pillars was officer safety and wellness. And that is important because that officer deals with the public. That person needs to be in a good mood. I used to tell my sergeant, say, listen, if you're having a bad day, we can't afford to have a bad day. So if things are not working for you at home, don't come to work angry today, take the day, stay at home. Get it right before you come to work, because your one bad experience with an officer that is having a bad day can be life or death, or it can just be a terrible experience that you're not going to forget, and you're going to tell 20 friends about this bad experience, and the next thing you know, that rolls downhill. So this is not a job. The studies show that divorce rates are high for police officers. The health risks for this job are high with police officers. It's a very stressful job. And yes, the departments deserve to take care of their personnel. And some of those things are simple. Having access to fitness whether it's a treadmill, something to work that stress off, something for them to take care of themselves, because I'm producing you with that product. I love talking about planes, but if you get on a plane and your flight attendant is not friendly to you, it gives you a bad experience and you don't want to fly that airline again. You shouldn't have to deal with that with a police officer that I know is at work today that is having a bad situation and is coming to work. Police suicide is real. It exists. The data is there. It is incumbent upon a chief, an executive, to take care of his people if he or she wants them to be productive individuals, effective and efficient, and impartial if you send them to work. So it's big. That's definitely a part of my recommendation and part of my core value for what I would do.
Chief Kochis.
Well, thank you. So for the longest time in our profession, what we did when somebody was having a problem or was in crisis, we would send them for what's called a fit for duty. We'd get a report back from the psychiatrist, say they were in crisis, and we'd get rid of them. That's what we did in our profession for many years. Got rid of a lot of good cops that way, good people that cared about the communities they served. Now, I'd like to think we're getting a little better. Okay, in Warrenton, we have a peer support team. We built that early on, and we are partnering with other agencies as well, because if you have a peer support team within your agency, police departments, even their larger departments, everybody knows each other. So how realistic that you're going to go talk to somebody you know? You might want to go to another agency and talk to their peer support team. So they partner together. I also think education for the public is important. So what we've done is we talk about this a lot with our community action team and the Faith Coalition. I'll give you an example. One of my officers came on a shift early on, and there was a young child that he had to give CPR to. Now, our officers work 12-hour shifts. That child didn't make it. That officer had a child about the same size, same age at home. He had 11 hours left in his shift to work. How do you think that worked out? Okay? These things are real. Our officers deal with real trauma every day. Okay? And as do our detectives. The detective that has to show up to the medical examiner's office on a Monday morning for an autopsy. Do you think it's normal to walk in there and see that scene? It's not. So shame on us if we're not taking care of our officers internally. I talked about the problem of sending broken cops into broken communities and what that has caused for our profession. There are a few things out there, just like the mental health system crisis in Virginia, that impacts cops as well. It is difficult to find licensed therapists, licensed clinicians, and psychiatrists. We work very hard on it. There is a one-stop shop that they're creating actually in Fairfax County for law enforcement officers away from a police department. If folks need help, they can go in there, whether it be for substance abuse, whether it be for mental health treatment. So there are some models that are being worked. We're getting better as a profession, but we have a ways to go. And in the days of short staffing, that officer I was talking about, that child that dealt with that early on in his shift, you can't always send them home. So it's something we have to be very mindful of, try to come up with some strategies to address it. The peer support program is a good start. There are other things that you can do, whether it be mandatory wellness checks every year or not. But in my opinion, they need to build off that peer support program, because those type of programs coming from their peers are much more successful being implemented than just coming from the chief. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting kind of close to the end of our time, so we'll just have a couple more questions, and then we'll let the candidates make statements if they wish. Major McDonald, what policies and practices would you implement to reduce the number of community members with mental illness who are charged with felony assault on a law enforcement officer during mental health crisis?
Reduce what policies I would make to reduce the number?
Yes.
So in regards to charging felony assaults, if a person is going through a mental health crisis, it is very possible that they could be violent. The overwhelming majority of individuals that are dealt with for behavioral health are not violent. There are rare cases where they are, but we're not charging the felony because a person is at, look, when you dial 911 and you arrive, a person is usually at the worst time of their life or the worst spot in their life. Charging them with an additional felony that 30 minutes of calm time or 45 minutes more they wouldn't be doing isn't relevant. And I find it hard to write a policy that I find it very hard to write a policy for something that we don't experience in the field. I find it very hypothetical in its asking, but we don't take a practice in charging people that are struggling with a behavioral health issue. We want to get them the care and get them what services they need. And that's part of the Marcus Alert and the 988, right? It's to prevent that from taking place. So there are CIT training which allows people to calm down. If someone is trashing their house, for example, we're not going to fight with them. We're going to let them calm down. We're going to slow it down until we can deal with that situation. So no, I wouldn't support writing felonies for that nature, if that makes sense.
So I agree with Major McDonald. We don't do that. We don't do it in Warrenton. We didn't do it in Alexandria. Now, what I will say is that when I was in Alexandria, I spearheaded the steering committee for the Alexandria Drug Treatment Court. And we actually use Charlottesville's treatment court as a model. And when you put together one of those programs, you have to lay out what type of charges can go to treatment court, okay? And one of the things that we came up with was assault on police. Now, getting the rank and file to buy in on that was pretty interesting, but we did. But look, the reality of it is that us that are up here that have been police officers for a while, we know there's assault on police and there's assault on police. Okay, and so assault on police is one of those charges, if they're charged with, and they're doing it because they were under the influence of something, then they could be diverted to drug treatment court, go through the program, and then be out, and it be gone. No disposition. Alexandria also had a mental health diversion court, if you will. It's not as formal as the drug treatment court, whereas the drug treatment court is run through the courts, through the judges, and this is more run through the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. But it's the same idea, and it's the same thing with assault on police. Because let's talk about what type of scenarios we're talking about here. We're talking about someone who is in mental health crisis. An officer is called for, and they wind up having to take that person under what's called an ECO, an emergency custody order, into custody, and they start fighting with them because they don't want to go. They probably don't want to go because they're probably going to the emergency room for 3 days, handcuffed to a gurney, and not going to really get the help they want to get because it's happened before, right? We have to understand and recognize that, okay? And typically, it's not an assault on a police officer. It's not a felony assault. They're typically trying to get away and may kick you by accident. So we have to look at each one of those cases, but like Major McDonald, that's not a practice that's been done anywhere I've worked in that scenario. So.
Thank you.
I can't support criminalizing someone that's going through a mental health crisis. What I can get behind is training the officers how to cope with a person that's going through a mental health crisis. Offering them the tactics, the skills of the mouth and the brain to work together to help solve and reduce that interaction. Again, everybody's talked about CIT training, showing some empathy, using time to de-escalate the situation, but I can't support criminalizing because somebody is having a mental health crisis. A lot of people are at their worst when they see us, and if we train our officers to be compassionate, understanding, because like I said earlier, I'm sure someone an officer has family members or know somebody that's had a crisis. And that's why it's important that our officers receive that training, stay up to date with it, and continue on with that training to identify when somebody is in a crisis, so you can help give them the support. I believe in that partnership with other mental health clinicians, other first responders to help support, so you don't have to criminalize the behaviors when somebody's in a crisis. So as like everybody said on this panel, there's no way in the world we can support that behavior.
Thank you. Okay, last question for Chief Kachis. Following this month's shooting at the University of Virginia, the university police used their emergency alert system to lock down the campus, instructing students to shelter in place overnight while they searched for what they considered an armed and dangerous shooter. Meanwhile, community members who lived near the university were entirely unaware that anything had happened. As a police chief, how would you go about establishing protocols so that your department can inform citizens of danger that originate on the UVA campus or other nearby jurisdictions?
Very, very good final question. Communication is key. And, you know, as a profession, we rely on a lot of things that, I'll give you an example. For the longest time, Facebook was what we would use as a profession to communicate with the public. Well, guess what? Not everybody has Facebook. Actually, my kids tell me I have Facebook because I'm old. But no, I guess, but okay. So we have to have multiple ways to communicate with the public, whether that be the UVA system, whether that be, so in Warrenton, we have an alert called Everbridge, okay? And you can sign up for it through dispatch, and we can geofence an area that we want alerted, and it could go right to that area, okay? We've used it. We had a homicide in an area that was close to a school. We geofenced that area, locked down, stay in place, and we did that. So that's another way. Another thing we have, I have a volunteer coordinator who, I mean, I'm in awe of the time, the amount of work that she does for free, but she has a community alert email system. Just an email system. Some people check email more than they check social media. So I guess what I'm getting at, there needs to be a multidimensional approach to communication with the public, just like we focus on a multidimensional approach to communicate with the rank and file, and everything we do. Communication is so important, okay? You know, a shooting like that, it shakes a community, okay? I mean, think about the college students' parents who are at home in California and they have a kid here at UVA. I mean, what do they know, right? So you got to have a multi-approach. The Everbridge system has been very helpful. There are other systems out there, other newer systems that we're exploring, but something that you can geofence and you can push out immediately is very important. The reality of it is, we're not going to keep up. The flow of information is too fast. You have a 24-hour news cycle, social media. We're going to try to get it out there and tell our story. The other thing I'll say is that when you push something out, you need to be clear on where the updates are going to be found. From the very first post, email, whatever the case may be, this is where the information is going to be flowed to. This is where the official information is going to be, whether it be the press, whether it be the community, and everything else needs to flow to that one place. So it's a challenge, communicate, especially in a critical incident such as that, and such a tragedy that shakes a community. It's important to communicate. Thank you.
Chief?
Not just at the university, because that's going to be few and far between, hopefully. In other communities where we're having the shots fired, gun calls. Those communities need to be notified as well. We are moving in the direction of an emergency manager. We just got approved through council, and that's working partnership with him, our city's PIO, and the departmental PIO for public safety. Is being able to push that out. We also have the reverse 911, and we're going to work on establishing that program to get it off the ground and get it running so people can be made aware of incidents. It cannot just be shots fired. It could be a senior alert. It could be a person with special needs that's gone missing. Just to get that notification out there, because we've used that in the past. We had just a little quick story. We had a young man went missing. We sent out reverse 911s. We sent it out on Facebook. And that gentleman was found all the way out by Boar's Head End, and he was almost near 5th Street Extended when he left. It worked because we sent out those messages, and our community started calling in, giving updates. So it can work, and that's a process that we are moving towards to help get notification, not just when something happens at the university. It should happen when you have a shooting on, West Main Street. The community needs to know that, and they expect that now. And we recognize it, and we need to address it as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Okay, I will, if any of the candidates wish to make a closing or clarifying statement. Oh, did I forget the major? Okay, we'll go.
That's disparate treatment. So what I would offer is this: rather than look at the actual incident, I would work very closely with the Office of Emergency Management. You only know how good you are when a disaster happens. And so you have to plan for that disaster. And usually the Office of Emergency Management, that is what they do. They plan for disasters. So communications, both chiefs have hit it. There's plenty of ways to send the information to you. But what we also need to know is that as organizations, if something happens in a neighboring jurisdiction, that we as organizations are talking to each other and we have that system in place. So once it happens, it just becomes natural to make the notifications. They may not be as quick as some people will like, but there is a process in place. So what I would, to answer your question, is I would go forward immediately creating processes for examples and disasters, threat hazard incidents.
Okay, now, Chief Kachis, do you want to say anything before we go?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. We've covered a lot of topics tonight and today. It was a long day, but I believe it was very productive. And I will say that I think Charlottesville has a really bright future, especially the Charlottesville Police Department, with anybody up here. I've gotten to know these two young men today, and pretty well, and I'm honored to sit here with them. I'll be honest with you. Whoever is chosen for this job, I just hope that some of the principles, some of those community policing tenets that we talked about today, about trust, you've heard a lot of words: trust, procedural justice, community involvement, community engagement, right? But none of this works by just the police department doing it. So whoever's chosen here today, I just hope as a community that you embrace this police department, as this police department should be embracing you. Because I think what I have seen is just a community, like I said early on, is just a community that wants to heal with this police department and be involved in it. And a police department that's accountable to the community. So I thank everybody for coming out and being here. And for my two fellow applicants here, I appreciate you guys sharing this with me today. Thank you.
Yeah, Major.
First off, thank you for calling me young.
I knew you.
I appreciate that. Again, I want to thank you all for coming out and the city of Charlottesville for allowing me to see this beautiful city. There's a lot here. You have a lot to be proud of as a community. The fact that you've taken the time to come here tonight, and I know some others are tuning in, says a lot about you and your community. Again, these two are fantastic individuals that are very well qualified, and I appreciate meeting the both of you for the day. They've had us going all day. It was very well ran. Down to the minute. So I thank you for that, and however this works out, I'll always be rooting for Charlottesville, and wish you all the best.
Chief Durant.
It starts with you, right? It's important to you. You wouldn't have come out here and spend this time. You got to hold us accountable. Any one of us, hold us accountable. We have to be a team of action, because you spent this time. It's important to you. It should be important to us. I won't take that lightly. I'm a man of few words sometimes, but I like to be a man of actions. So if we get through this process, we're gonna start moving. And I appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate the panel. Whoever it is, I wish the department, the city, the community much success. It doesn't matter. Any one of them qualified in my head. So with that, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all three of the candidates. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything else to say at this point?
And let me say, I am proud to be a part of this community. We ask you for questions, and the questions that the citizens in this community provided are deep, they're thoughtful, they're insightful, and they exercise these three men up here too. And we appreciate that, and that shows the interest that this community has in this police department and in this role of the police chief. So thank you, thank you, thank you very much. And I appreciate the partnership with the Police Civilian Oversight Board. We have provided some sodas and other items in the back as you meal around and you want to get close to these people, ask them the question that maybe didn't get asked. We've provided for the next hour to do that. But thank you all, and it's been a good presentation. Thank you much.